So I started working at CoStar Group in October of 2020 and got to an office around April of 2021. On my desk was a phone, the kind that you have a cord in it and has like the spiral curly fry thing that attaches to a handset. I hadn't had one of those in like 9 years. So it rings and I pick it up because that seemed like the thing to do. And someone wanted to talk to somebody else. And so I said, okay, and I hit some buttons, I hung up, and I unplugged it. And it's still unplugged a couple of years later. You might be wondering, why is she talking about old school phones in like an AI talk? And it's because years ago, I used to know how to transfer. Occasionally, I could even conference. And, I could do like the megaphone when I had a part-time job at a bookstore. I could do all those things. I can't do any of those things now because the skills that we need for our jobs, they change all the time. And in the last 6 years, LinkedIn estimates that they've changed about 25%. In 2030, they estimate that about 60% of the skills that we need to do our jobs are about to change, largely because of AI. A whole lot of things are going to change. So we know that a lot of things are going to be different. We know that things that we used to need, we don't need anymore, and there's all these new things that we do. The products we build, the way we work, the role we play, the skills that we need are all going to change. And I heard the question earlier about how do you do change management? Well, my old firm, CEB, which is now Gartner, would tell you, you don't worry so much about change management, you hire people who are good at change. And so that's going to be a differentiator as we move into this new space, except that one thing is not going to change and ain't never going to change. Feel free to replace creatives with product owner, executive team, agency direction or leadership, because people will always be the hard part and people will always need to be sorted out. So don't you worry about that. So I'm actually going to start at the end of the talk and give you my conclusion now. This is scary, right? You're worried about your job. You're worried about your kid's job. You're worried about bias and disinformation and what's going to happen. It is easy to be scared, and you are right to be scared. But we need to choose a different mindset here. We need to not choose abundance and naivete. We thought social media was going to change the world for the better, right? That was the thing a while ago. We thought this is going to be great. We're all going to be one family. It's going to be awesome. Like, clearly that did not happen. So while we can have a lot of good things, we can also have a lot of bad things too. But again, we need to choose our mindset that we are going to be open and that we are going to learn and that we're going to adapt, and it's going to be bumpy. Abram Maldonado from OpenAI, Scott Galloway, a lot of people will say this. Someone who knows AI will take your job before AI does. That next job that you're looking for, you're going to need some capability in it. So let's talk about how that changes the products that we build. So I am obsessed with this new Spotify thing with Daylist. It always seems to nail it. So personalization isn't new. We've been doing that for a long time. But for a long time, we used rules engines or what is called a narrow type of generative AI, a narrow AI application. But now personalization is able to be done on a much more dramatic level. We're able to get a lot more data points and do a lot more things. So it's more of a capability change here. Accessibility, highly promising. So there are folks who cannot visualize things. They have that limitation. So if they are trying to figure out what is this thing you're describing, they can put it into DALL-E and get with a prompt and be able to, oh, okay, I get it. That's what you meant. If you have autism and you're trying to communicate with your colleagues, you can put Slack messages into GPT and say, what are they trying to say here? Is there a joke? Is there a thing I'm not getting? Or am I communicating in a way that's going to alienate my colleagues? So accessibility is a place where I think we can see tremendous possibility. But right now, according to some University of Washington research, it's pretty mixed. And there's a lot of ableist stuff. And I'm afraid they don't handle prosthetics very well. It comes out looking weird. And when I tried to get DALL-E to show me a person in a wheelchair, he had no face. So I think there's a lot of work to be done here, but a lot of promise. So CoStar Group is involved in real estate. And while I mostly work on the commercial side and supporting a lot of our commercial clients, you might have seen homes.com ad somewhere on the internet or on the Super Bowl or driving around. And so what's interesting about what they're doing on the Homes team is that this is like the old school MLS sheet. You probably saw it if you went to an open house, right? As someone who went to design school and has been a designer and product manager, this sucks, right? It's not consumable, it's not easy. But everybody is getting the same data set. So the MLS feeds Redfin and Zillow and all these folks. So the teams at CoStar figured out, well, how can I extract all that data, pull out the highlights that we think are most relevant to people who might be buying in this neighborhood, put that right on top, and make all of this information a lot easier to consume. And so while we're getting the same data feeds as other people, we're able to really enhance how we show them. And then, it doesn't help that we have like millions of parks and schools and neighborhoods on our platform to supplement that. Okay, 95%. An AI can predict 95% of human rights trials. Or I'm sorry, I said 79. Let me get that right. So predictions. This, again, not new. A lot of narrow applications and predictive models have been out there, but they can take in a lot more data. And then they can be able to do smarter things. So we're seeing some interesting applications there. So confession, this is my friend's product. So they just launched, and what they do is they look at all the traffic between clients and their service providers, all the traffic through Teams messages, emails back and forth, other data points, and they're able to evaluate the health of an account from a client and a vendor perspective without having an account representative saying, I think that's a 9, or having to do a lot of reporting. The ability to look into accounts and before say, hey, I think this is starting to slide to the left. And, what is that? I can also predict out based upon what I'm seeing, here's where I think you're going to be in 3 months. I can tell you before your next monthly status meeting, you got a problem here, and you probably need to lean in. And you can do all of that without ever getting an official report or filing a survey. This is just being able to have observations and collect them. Right now, they're doing it against a framework that they developed, but then you could even have some that are derived. So there's a lot of possibility here with that. So I talked a little bit about real estate because that's what I do most of the time. One thing I thought was really interesting is that we can't use AI for a lot of our predictions in real estate because it's really important that we're able to communicate to a B2B audience how we got to the numbers. So a lot of times, with a lot, some of these Gen AI tools, they're really bad at being explainable, and you don't know. They don't know. If you ask them, and they're like, how'd you get to that? Whatever, did a thing. And so that's not going to cut it in a B2B world. That's not going to cut it in a world where you have to be able to explain how did we get here. And so one thing we thought was really interesting on the commercial side of the business is we said, here's the peers, here's where it's coming from, here's our sources, here's how we got to it. If you don't agree with the peers that we said for the building, that'll determine the estimated rent rate, well then, let's modify that. And so in Homes.com, instead of saying, here's your consolidated estimate that's a black box, we're like, listen, we actually went out and got you all of these companies who do these AVMs, which is an automated valuation model, and we're just gonna show it to you. And we're gonna let you be able to contextualize that and come to your own conclusion. And so that we can be more transparent and explainable, particularly with professionals who really need to be able to explain things. And well, that's what the AI said, just ain't gonna cut it. Another interesting one, Epic, which does a lot of EHR, so electronic health records. So Epic put human doctors against AI-written notes. You want to guess who won? Notes to their patients? Oh, the AI crushed it, right? Because the humans are like, they're trying to like enter everything into my pediatricians, like trying to keep up with all these charts. They're attached to their laptops. And then they said, how's your mental health? And you're like, what? And so the AI was able to say, instead of these, very kind of, jargony reports to say, hey, and how's your kid? And you've improved since last week. And so, but what if we could take some of those annoying tasks away from doctors and let them actually do the personal stuff instead of all the administrative crap? There's a lot of possibilities there. When you were a kid, did your parents have like a safe word? Like, don't go with this person unless they sell you this word. Like we had one. Yeah, you need to bring that back. If you don't have that, like pick a safe word for your parents, for your kids, for everybody, because the amount of fraud, and obviously sitting in a room with some folks from the intelligence agencies will know this way better than me, but the amount of fraud, disinformation, misinformation is exploding. So bring back that safe word. So when someone's like, I need money, I'm like, so? Or when did I get that really bad haircut in middle school? What did it look like? There was a really interesting case out of Baltimore County, Maryland, not too far from here. And a principal, there was a deep fake of a principal saying horrible, awful things. And they played the video. It sounds real. Now, a couple months ago, it didn't sound real. It was kind of all the same volume. It was kind of all the same intensity. But like this, you couldn't really tell. The good news is they found the person. He had been arrested, and the principal who did nothing wrong has been exonerated. But like, that's going to be kind of tough. So this is a huge area that we got to pay attention to. So for years, people in the design age, we had like principles, heuristics. I don't know why I call them heuristics because nobody knows what heuristic is. But basically, it's like a principle. These general things that we said, this is what makes for a good design. This is what makes for a good product. And when mobile came out, we added one. We said portability. You need to be able to go from one place to another. So now we need new principles. And I tried to add on, and it just didn't work. And so I had to come back and really rethink this in terms of these new products. And there's a couple that are, been there for a while, like it's useful, it's supportive, it's accessible. But the need for adaptability and continuous learning is perhaps the most interesting. And the one that I didn't figure out until AI told me. Because when you ship a model, it continues to learn and grow and develop. You don't have to ship another update necessarily to make an improvement. It will continue along this path. And so we kind of have to change the way we think about delivering an improvement when this can continue to make changes even without us. Principles are the ones I came up with. You can think about the vanilla, the base like ice cream. You can make all sorts of flavors. You can make all sorts of mix-ins. You should really think about for your agency or your organization, what are the right principles for your future products? It is time to rethink those. It is time to go back. There's a great site called Design Principles for the Win. You can check out what a lot of other companies are doing, but I would also tell you those principles are now dated because a lot of them haven't readjusted for AI. Some of it was really good and you should keep that, and some of it should be added on, but I think it's time to really think, what kind of experience do we want to have? What customer do we want to serve? And how are we going to serve them differently with AI? So the way we work is going to change a lot too. Automation. So Netflix can not only automate the creation of the images for all their videos, they can figure out exactly which one to show you based on what they know about your viewing patterns. As far as augmentation goes, at Airbnb, they developed this a couple years ago. They can sketch on a whiteboard, take a picture, and generate a comp. So their design system is hooked up to a computer vision application. So we're able to do prototyping really quick. And with some of these other tools that I've shown you here, you don't need a designer, which of course makes me want to throw up, to be able to generate a prototype. So how much faster could you explore an idea? How much faster could you get something out to customers? And how many more iterations would you be able to do before you even had to engage an engineering team? And how much could you say, well, okay, now when we're making that investment, we know it's worth it. And we know what we need to build, because that's been the big problem for a lot of years. It's also, I write UX copy with ChatGPT all day long. Oh, what am I going to say for this error message? What am I going to call this feature? What am I going to do this other thing? Oh, here, give me 20 ideas. The other one, obviously analysis is something AI is really good for when you get a ton of things. So lots of ways to look at new interviews, but it really does change our role, because now you have an AI team and you need to be a manager of a team, whether you had people or not. And so start thinking of yourself as an AI manager. What are their capabilities? How do I delegate? Who do I have? Who's my strategist? Who's my best researcher? We're going with Perplexity. Who's going to give me feedback on my reports? And I think we're going to see that the traditional roles of engineering, product, and design are going to change a lot. And they're going to be merging together quite a bit. So we're going to have to run different kinds of experiments because now we have to think about, all of these different ways that we're going to use AI, from training to market research. And I don't know why we're so obsessed with magic and everything's magic. Magic Studio, the iconography of magic, but I think it's an affordance. So it's a way of introducing and making people comfortable with using these tools. If you remember, like, your camera on your iPhone looked like a camera. The library on your iPhone looked like a bookshelf. We call that skeuomorphic design, and now we do what we call flat design. But the whole idea was, how do I make people feel comfortable? And so as product managers, you're gonna have to do that, do the math. I'm not even gonna try, but data strategy is something that, man, that ship ain't gonna turn quick. So you gotta know where it's going. And thinking about the virtuous cycle. How do I continue to get things into the cycle and go around and around? This is kind of like Jim Collins' flywheel, but it's a whole new way of thinking about it because of this continuous learning, continuous adaptation. So, oh yeah, and don't do what Google did with this Gemini thing for image generation. That was bad. So the good news is, if you had an English degree and you thought it was worthless, it is not now, because English is the new programming. So if you're good at being able to communicate and visualize and direct and inform using English, congratulations, you just got an upgrade for the first time in a long time. Which is really good, because my husband has an English degree, but he's a technical program manager. And so because with programming, you're able to that really important thing is, I need to visualize where I'm going with this, and I need to be able to communicate that, and not to know the tools. That's a big shift. Your command of Jira is not as valuable as it used to be. Your ability to understand how to break down a project into pieces is more valuable now. It's a major shift in how the value you create is and where you want to be focused on. It's not just the tools. The tools are going to get more and more handled. It's your ability to do the thinking, to do the strategy, and communicate that to the AI. So you can learn a lot about prompt building blocks. I've got an example here. Like I said, I've got a lot of examples of things. There's a great course called AI for Everyone. It's free. It's on Coursera by Andrew Ng. I definitely recommend you check it out. It's only a couple of hours. It's a really great, and some of the images on the slide here are from that, so you can check that out. Obviously, your ability to understand data, that's what we do all day. We have millions and millions of records of real estate data from all sorts of different sources, so that is my life. But what's the strategy? And again, it comes back to the one thing that will never change. People are weird and irrational, and we have to get them to agree on things. So your storytelling, your communication, your ability to collaborate, hugely important skills that never stop being in, and at least from the product and design community, especially from the design community, because they did not teach us that in design school. We did not have that skill set. We talked about responsibility. So the last thing is to go back to the beginning, which is, it's scary, right? It's overwhelming, and you think it's going to pass you by. Nobody knows where this is going. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We are at the beginning of this adventure. And the skill set that you need is in some ways the most accessible skill set that we've had for technology for, 10 years? You don't need to know a programming language. You don't need to be able to spin up a cloud environment. You need to know how to use words. You need to know how to have ideas and be able to communicate that to a machine. And that opens up a world of possibility. So you got to get in there. As leaders, you got to get in there. Now, we need to do it responsibly, and we need to have some guardrails. I agree with that point. But you as leaders need to get going. You as people, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, in a day I said, well, why don't you use ChatGPT? Why don't you use Perplexity? Why don't you use Gemini? Why don't you use these other tools? And so, we got to get in there and figure these things out, because that's the only way this is going to work. But there's a lot there. So, kind of try and shift your mindset. Change is opportunity. So, thank you.